The silent partner Olivia Reeves adjusted the floral centerpiece on the dining table, her fingers lingering on a pale blue hydrangea. The dining room smelled of rosemary chicken and fresh bread, a meal she had spent the afternoon perfecting. It was their 7th anniversary, and she wanted everything to be just right for Daniel. The front door clicked open precisely at 7:30. Daniel Reeves strode in, his tailored suit crisp despite the long day at the investment firm. He loosened his tie and glanced at the spread on the table, offering a distracted smile. "Looks nice," he said, checking his phone. "The Peterson account just closed. Big win." Olivia beamed. "That's wonderful. I made your favorite to celebrate our anniversary, but now we have 2 things to toast to." Daniel's expression shifted, a flicker of realization crossing his face. "Right, 7 years." He pecked her cheek. "Sorry, no gift. The deal consumed everything." "Your success is gift enough," Olivia said, meaning it. She had always taken pride in being the foundation that allowed his ambition to flourish, managing their home and social calendar while he climbed the corporate ladder. Dinner passed with Daniel describing his triumph, Olivia listening attentively as she always did. She'd long ago accepted her role as his sounding board, his comfort, his haven from the competitive world he thrived in. Later that week, Olivia accompanied Daniel to the firm's gala. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated. As they entered the opulent ballroom, she felt Daniel's hand slip from the small of her back as he was drawn into conversation with the company's executives. Olivia drifted toward the bar, ordering a sparkling water. The bartender raised an eyebrow. "Nothing stronger?" "I'm the designated driver," she explained with a smile. "Ah, the responsible one." He nodded, sliding her the water. The description fit her perfectly. Responsible, reliable, steady. Words that had once felt like virtues now clung to her like anchors. Across the room, Daniel laughed loudly among a group. That included Vanessa Harlow, the firm's new marketing director. Vanessa wore a striking red dress that commanded attention, her animated gestures punctuating whatever story she was telling. Daniel leaned toward her, captivated. Olivia recognized the look in his eyes. It was how he used to look at her before familiarity had dulled his interest. "You're Daniel's wife, right?" A woman approached, introducing herself as another partner's spouse. "Yes, I'm Olivia." "What do you do?" The question always made her pause. "I manage our household. Before that, I studied art history." "Oh," the woman replied, her interest visibly waning. "How traditional." Olivia sipped her water, feeling suddenly transparent. In this room of accomplished professionals, her choices seemed to render her invisible. Later that night, as they drove home in silence, Daniel finally spoke. "Vanessa's launching a new campaign that could revolutionize our client acquisition process." "That's impressive," Olivia offered. "She's impressive," Daniel continued. "Harvard MBA, ran her own firm in London, speaks 4 languages. He glanced at Olivia. "You should have heard her stories about photographing the Northern Lights while on assignment in Iceland." "Photography?" Olivia perked up. "I've always loved—" "You should think about doing something, Liv," he interrupted. "A hobby, a class, something." "Something to make me less ordinary." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Daniel sighed. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." That night, Olivia lay awake, Daniel's breathing steady beside her. She thought about the camera her parents had given her for her 16th birthday, how she'd spent that summer documenting everything from dewdrops on spider webs to the weathered lines on her grandfather's face. Her teacher had called her work insightful and emotionally resonant. But then life had happened. College, meeting Daniel, supporting his dreams. Somewhere along the way, her camera had been relegated to a box in the attic, her passions set, aside for a life that now felt increasingly hollow. Olivia turned toward the window, watching moonlight filter through the curtains. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if perhaps she had settled for being a footnote in someone else's story when she might have written her own. The breaking point. The first sign came in the form of late nights. Daniel's excuses grew increasingly vague. Client meetings that mysteriously lacked details, work emergencies that required no follow-up the next day. Olivia noticed but said nothing, busying herself with volunteer work at the local art museum and rediscovering books she'd once loved. One evening, as autumn leaves skittered across their driveway, she found herself alone again. A text from Daniel. "Working late. Don't wait up." She wandered upstairs to their rarely used attic, drawn by a memory that had been tugging at her for weeks. There, beneath a dusty sheet, she found her old camera case. The Canon EOS felt both foreign and familiar in her hands. The battery was long dead, but she cradled it like a lost treasure, memories flooding back. Her eye for composition, the thrill of capturing a perfect moment, the darkroom sessions where images emerged like magic under her guidance. She was still, holding the camera when she heard the front door open well past midnight. Voices drifted up, Daniel's and a woman's, their laughter intimate and conspiratorial. Olivia froze, the camera clutched to her chest like a shield. "She won't be awake," Daniel was saying. "She never waits up anymore." "Are you sure this is okay?" The woman's voice was hesitant but excited. "Vanessa." "It's fine. Just for a drink." Olivia set the camera down gently and descended the stairs, each step measured and deliberate. They stood in the entryway, Vanessa's hand on Daniel's arm, both freezing when they saw her. "Olivia." Daniel straightened, guilt flickering across his face before hardening into defiance. "We were just going to have a nightcap to celebrate the Henderson deal." Olivia looked between them, noting Vanessa's slightly smudged lipstick. The way Daniel's collar was askew. "In our home? How considerate of you to include me." Vanessa at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I should go." "No," Olivia surprised herself with her calm. "I think you should both be honest about what's happening here." The confrontation that followed was surprisingly quiet. No screaming, no throwing things, just the dismantling of 7 years, piece by painful piece. Daniel admitted to the affair, his justifications cutting deeper than the betrayal itself. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he said. "I need someone who challenges me, who excites me." "Someone less ordinary," Olivia finished for him, echoing his unspoken criticism. Daniel didn't deny it. "We've grown apart, Liv. You've been content to live in my shadow. But I need an equal, a partner who's building something of her own." "Someone like Vanessa," she said flatly. "Yes." The single word held finality. "I'm sorry, but I want a divorce." 3. Weeks later, Olivia stood in an empty apartment across town, surrounded by boxes containing the half-life she'd been allocated in the separation. Daniel had kept the house. His name was on the mortgage, after all, and she hadn't fought him on. What was the point? Every corner held memories she no longer wanted. The apartment was small but flooded with natural light, the one non-negotiable feature she'd insisted on. She unpacked methodically, setting up her new life with the same care she'd once devoted to creating their home. When she reached the box containing her camera, she placed it on the windowsill, a promise to herself. That evening, her sister Fiona arrived with takeout and determination. "Enough moping," she announced, barging in without knocking. "You've given that man enough of your life." Olivia managed a small smile. "I'm not moping. I'm regrouping." Fiona surveyed the apartment, nodding approvingly at Olivia's arranging. Her gaze landed on the camera. "Is that the old Canon? I remember when you used to carry that thing everywhere." "I found it in the attic before." Olivia trailed off. "Before Daniel showed his true colors?" Fiona supplied, unpacking containers of Thai food. "Why'd you stop? You were good. Really good." Olivia shrugged. "Life happened. Daniel's career was taking off, and someone needed to manage everything else. And now? Now I need a job," Olivia said practically. "My share of the assets will only last so long." Fiona rolled her eyes. "That's not what I meant. Now you need a life, Liv. Your life." She pointed her fork at the camera. "Starting with that." The next morning, Olivia woke before dawn, the apartment still unfamiliar in the gray light. On impulse, she grabbed the camera, found a hardware store that sold the right battery, and headed to the harbor. She had no plan, just an urge to capture. The day's beginning. The marina was quiet, fog hanging low over the water. An elderly fisherman prepared his boat, his weathered hands working with practiced efficiency. Without overthinking, Olivia raised the camera and began shooting. The mist curling around dock posts, the man's face lined like a map of his life, the single seagull watching hopefully for scraps. The fisherman noticed her but didn't object, simply nodding as he went about his routine. When the sun finally broke through, casting long golden fingers across the water, Olivia caught her breath at the beauty of it. Her finger pressed the shutter again and again. Later, reviewing the images on her laptop, she felt something stir within her, a spark of the passion she'd abandoned years ago. One photo in particular caught her attention, the fisherman gazing. Out at the horizon, his expression a perfect blend of weariness and hope. Something about it resonated deeply. On impulse, she sent it to her old college friend, Jasmine, who now worked at a local arts magazine. "Remember when we used to dream about becoming photographers?" she wrote. "I think I might want to try again." Jasmine's reply came within the hour. "This is stunning, raw and honest. Can I show our editor?" 3 days later, Olivia sat across from Eleanor Wright, the magazine's photography editor, who studied her harbor photos with critical intensity. "These show natural talent," Eleanor said finally. "Untrained but authentic. We need someone to shoot our Hidden City feature next month. It's not glamorous and doesn't pay much, but it could be a start." Olivia thought of Daniel, of Vanessa, of the life she'd put on hold. Then she thought of the peace she'd felt at the harbor, camera in hand, the world opening up through her lens. "Yes," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I'd like that very much." The metamorphosis. The first assignment was both terrifying and exhilarating. Hidden City required Olivia to document overlooked urban spaces, the community gardens tucked between skyscrapers, century-old architectural details above eye level, the makeshift art installations in abandoned lots. Her hands trembled as she adjusted settings, the camera still feeling like a stranger's tool rather than an extension of herself. "You're overthinking it," Eleanor advised during their check-in. "Stop trying to take perfect photos and start showing me what you see." The words resonated. That evening, Olivia wandered through the city's oldest neighborhood as dusk settled. A group of elderly men played dominoes at a weathered table, their laughter echoing against brick walls covered in faded advertisements from another era. She raised her camera, no longer calculating angles and exposure, simply responding to the moment. When the magazine published her spread 2 weeks later, Olivia stared at her name in print, disbelieving. Eleanor had titled it Timekeepers, 12. Images that captured the neighborhood's timeless rhythm, anchored by the domino players whose hands told stories her words never could. "It's selling out at newsstands," Jasmine reported, voice bright with excitement. "Eleanor wants to know if you'd consider a regular column." The offer came with a modest salary, enough to supplement her dwindling savings. Olivia accepted immediately, feeling a foundation forming beneath her new life. 6 months into her reinvention, Olivia's routine had transformed completely. Mornings found her in photography workshops at the community college, afternoons shooting for the magazine, evenings editing in her apartment that increasingly resembled a working studio. The walls displayed her published work alongside inspirational images from photographers she admired. Equipment gradually accumulated: better lenses, lighting setups, a professional-grade printer. Her style evolved from technically competent to distinctively her own. Critics noted her ability to capture vulnerability in unexpected places, the tenderness in a construction worker's hands as he fed pigeons during lunch break, the quiet dignity of a street vendor arranging flowers before dawn, the hesitant joy of new immigrants celebrating their first holiday in a strange land. "You have an unusual perspective," commented Thomas Blackwood, a visiting photographer whose workshop Olivia had scraped together money to attend. "You see people at the precise moment they forget to perform." "I know what it's like to be invisible," Olivia replied, surprising herself with the candor. "It teaches you to notice others who might feel the same." Thomas studied her thoughtfully. "There's a juried exhibition next month at the Westridge Gallery. You should submit a portfolio." The suggestion seemed preposterous. Westridge showcased established artists, not magazine photographers with barely a year's professional experience. Yet that night Olivia couldn't sleep, her mind racing with possibilities. By morning, she had decided on a theme: ordinary extraordinary. A series capturing people engaged in mundane activities that revealed unexpected beauty. For weeks, she pursued the project with single-minded focus, rising before dawn to photograph bakery workers creating elaborate pastries in flour-dusted silence, staying late to capture janitors who danced with mops when they thought buildings were empty, spending rainy Sundays with window washers who turned skyscrapers into canvases of swirling patterns. When the acceptance letter from Westridge arrived, Olivia read it 3 times before believing it. Not only had her work been selected, but the curator had specifically mentioned its emotional resonance and technical sophistication. The exhibition opened on a frigid January evening. Olivia wore a vintage burgundy dress that Fiona had insisted suited her newfound confidence. Standing beside her photographs, explaining her process to curious attendees, she caught glimpses of herself in the gallery's mirrored columns, a woman she barely recognized, animated and assured. "Your work is selling," the gallery director informed her midway through the evening. 3 pieces already, including the centerpiece. The centerpiece, titled Symphony in Steam, showed an elderly cook orchestrating multiple woks in a tiny restaurant kitchen, his movements balletic despite the cramped space, steam illuminated by golden light that transformed the humble setting into something mythic. "Who bought it?" Olivia asked, surprised by her reluctance to part with the image. "Anonymous collector," the director replied, "but they've inquired about commissioning more work. Here's their contact information if you're interested." The business card read simply, "JT Ventures, Private Art Acquisitions." The commission they proposed was large enough that Olivia had to sit down while reading the email, a series documenting transitional spaces in major international cities, with all expenses covered. "It's a trap," Fiona declared dramatically when Olivia called her. "No one pays that much to an unknown photographer." "Not completely unknown anymore," Olivia corrected, still dazed by the opportunity. "And I checked them out. They're legitimate. They represent several hotel chains that feature local photography." After careful negotiation, Olivia accepted the commission. Spring saw her traveling to Chicago, Montreal, San Francisco, capturing liminal spaces as diverse as ferry terminals at dawn, market squares between night and morning shifts, and transit hubs where travelers existed briefly between departure and arrival. Her photography technique refined with each assignment. She mastered difficult lighting conditions, developed a distinctive editing style that emphasized emotional connection without manipulation, and learned to anticipate moments before they unfolded. Professional equipment replaced her amateur gear, though she kept the old Canon as a talisman. Reviews began appearing in photography journals and art blogs. Newcomer Olivia Reeves brings extraordinary sensitivity to ordinary transitions, wrote one influential critic. Her images reveal the poetry in passages we typically hurry through without noticing. By summer, she had moved to a larger apartment with space for a proper studio. Gallery representatives began calling. A small publishing house proposed a coffee table book. Her Instagram following grew from hundreds to thousands, then tens of thousands. One evening, exhausted but exhilarated after returning from an assignment in Barcelona, Olivia found herself scrolling through social media when a familiar name appeared. Daniel had commented on one of her professional posts. "Always knew you had potential," he wrote, the casual presumption of his words stinging even now. She blocked him without replying, then turned her attention to sorting through the thousands of images from her travels. Tomorrow would bring a meeting with the Museum of Contemporary Photography, which had expressed interest in featuring her work in their upcoming exhibition on emerging artists. As she worked late into the night, Olivia reflected on her own transformation. The woman who had once defined herself through someone else's ambitions now traveled the world capturing moments that others overlooked. The pain of Daniel's betrayal had faded, replaced by gratitude for the awakening it had forced upon her. Her phone chimed with a message from JT Ventures. Tokyo assignment confirmed for September. Contract to follow. Another city, another opportunity to transform ordinary moments into art. Olivia smiled, no longer surprised by the turns her life had taken. The woman who had been called ordinary had found the extraordinary in herself, one frame at a time. The exhibition. You can't possibly be serious. Olivia stared at the email on her screen, certain she had misunderstood. Beside her, Eleanor sipped her coffee with maddening calm. The International Photography Awards are absolutely serious. Being nominated for New Vision Artist of the Year doesn't happen by accident. 18 months had passed since Olivia's first magazine assignment. The trajectory of her career resembled a rocket launch rather than a gradual climb, from local features to international commissions, from small gallery showings to museum exhibitions. Her distinctive style had become instantly recognizable. Intimate portraits of human moments within vast impersonal spaces, the tension between isolation and connection captured with technical brilliance and emotional authenticity. There must be some mistake, Olivia insisted, scrolling through the nomination details. I'm competing against photographers who've been working for decades, which makes your nomination all the more impressive, Eleanor pointed out. Your Tokyo series changed the conversation about urban isolation. The Venice Biennale exhibition is just confirmation of what those of us who discovered you already knew. The Venice Biennale, the most prestigious showcase in the art world. The nomination had secured Olivia an invitation to exhibit in the Contemporary Vision Pavilion, alongside artists whose work she had studied reverently. The exhibition would coincide with the awards ceremony, guaranteeing attendance by the most influential figures in photography and fine art. Preparation consumed the next 3 months. Olivia selected 30 images for her exhibition space, each representing a milestone in her artistic evolution. The centerpiece would be Convergence, a triptych from her Tokyo series showing 3 strangers in a rain-drenched train station, their paths intersecting for mere seconds, their expressions capturing profound human longing. "We should discuss your appearance," said Jasmine during one of their regular brunches. Now, Olivia's unofficial publicist, she had orchestrated a series of interviews and features leading up to Venice. "The art world is still a fashion show, and you'll be photographed extensively," Olivia laughed. "I spend my life behind the camera, not in front of it." Exactly why we need to prepare. This isn't just an exhibition, it's your introduction to the international art scene. Jasmine's expression softened. "You've earned this moment, Liv. Let yourself shine." 2 weeks before departure, a sleek black envelope arrived at Olivia's studio. Inside was an invitation to an exclusive pre-Biennale reception hosted by Whitcomb Gallery. one of the most prestigious contemporary art spaces with locations in London, New York, and now Venice. The handwritten note from director Evelyn Whitcomb expressed interest in discussing representation. Gallery representation would change everything, Thomas Blackwood explained when Olivia called him for advice. Their relationship had evolved from mentor-student to colleagues who respected each other's work. Whitcomb doesn't just sell art, they build careers. They only take on artists they believe will define their generation. Venice welcomed Olivia with golden September light that transformed the ancient city into a photographer's dream. Her hotel overlooked a quiet canal where gondoliers called to each other in musical Italian. The city's beauty was almost distracting, but Olivia remained focused on finalizing her exhibition installation. The Contemporary Vision Pavilion occupied a restored 16th-century palazzo, its classical architecture providing a striking contrast to the modern works within. Olivia's space, a vaulted room with original frescoed ceilings, required careful lighting design to balance historical ambiance with clear visibility of her photographs. "It's perfect," declared Philippe, the pavilion curator, as they made final adjustments. "Your work speaks of human connection within alienating environments. This room does exactly the same, intimate yet grand." The night of the Whitcomb reception arrived with theatrical timing, a brief thunderstorm clearing just as attendees began arriving, leaving Venice's cobblestones glistening under ornate street lamps. Olivia chose a midnight blue gown with architectural lines that echoed her compositional style. Her formerly mousy brown hair now cut in a sophisticated bob that framed her face. Fiona, who had flown in for moral support, whistled appreciatively. "Daniel wouldn't recognize you." "That's not the point," Olivia replied, though she couldn't deny the satisfaction in the thought. "Maybe not the point," Fiona conceded, "but certainly a delicious bonus." The Whitcomb Gallery had been transformed into a wonderland of art, champagne, and calculated social choreography. Olivia navigated the crowd with newfound confidence, discussing her process with critics, accepting compliments from fellow photographers, exchanging cards with curators. Her name floated through conversations, usually accompanied by breakthrough artist and fresh perspective. Ms. Reeves, a cultured voice, interrupted her conversation with a German museum director. "Evelyn Whitcomb. Your work has been the talk of our acquisition committee." The gallery director was exactly as Olivia had imagined. Elegant, incisive, and completely focused on the business of art even while making social conversation. They discussed Olivia's Tokyo series, the upcoming awards, and finally, the possibility of representation. "We're planning a new master's exhibition in New York this December," Evelyn explained. "Your Convergence triptych would be the centerpiece. We'd like to offer you an exclusive contract for North American representation." The terms she outlined made Olivia glad for the champagne glass in her hand, something to grip as the numbers exceeded anything she had imagined possible. Before she could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A group of late arrivals entered, executives from Worldview Media, the multinational corporation that had recently acquired several prestigious art publications. Olivia recognized some faces from industry events, but one stopped her cold. Daniel. He looked essentially the same, perhaps a bit heavier, his hairline slightly receded, but carried himself with the entitled confidence of someone who believed he belonged. In any room, beside him stood Vanessa, draped in designer fashion, her hand proprietarily on his arm. "Acquaintances of yours?" Evelyn asked, noting Olivia's sudden tension. "Ancient history," Olivia replied, recovering quickly. Now, about the New York exhibition, they continued their conversation. But Olivia's awareness had split, one part engaged with this career-defining opportunity, another acutely conscious of Daniel's presence across the room. He hadn't noticed her yet, too busy introducing himself to anyone who might advance Worldview's influence. The evening progressed with the elaborate social rituals of the art world. Olivia signed preliminary paperwork with Whitcomb Gallery, accepted invitations to private viewings, and discussed a possible commission from a Japanese technology corporation that admired her Tokyo series. Throughout it all, she maintained a graceful orbit that never quite intersected with Daniel's path. Until it did. "I need some air," she told Fiona, stepping onto a balcony overlooking the Grand Canal. Venice sparkled below, its lights reflected in dark waters that had witnessed centuries of human drama. "Olivia!" She didn't need to turn to recognize the voice, though it carried a note of uncertainty that would have been unimaginable in their marriage. Composing her expression, she faced her ex-husband. "Hello, Daniel. I thought it was you, but—" He gestured vaguely at her appearance, her surroundings, the implicit success of her presence at this event. "You look different. I am different. Clearly." His eyes held confusion, reassessment. "I saw your name on the Biennale program. Worldview is covering the awards. I never imagined that I could be more than ordinary." The words held no bitterness. Now, only a statement of fact. Before he could respond, Evelyn appeared at the balcony entrance. "Olivia, there's someone you must meet. The director from the Tokyo Museum of Photography is asking specifically for you." Daniel's eyebrows rose at this evidence of Olivia's importance. She nodded graciously to Evelyn. "I'll be right there." Turning back to Daniel, she offered a smile that held neither animosity nor particular warmth. "Enjoy the exhibition. I hear the Contemporary Vision Pavilion is extraordinary this year." With that, she glided back into the glittering reception, leaving him at the balcony rail. As conversations enveloped her, Olivia realized she felt nothing but a vague curiosity about this man who had once defined her world. The real revelation wasn't seeing Daniel again. It was understanding how completely she had moved beyond him. The Biennale opening 2 days later drew international attention. Critics praised the Contemporary Vision Pavilion as boundary-pushing and revelatory. Olivia's exhibition space remained consistently crowded, visitors lingering before her images, often returning for second viewings. "Your work creates a strange intimacy," one reviewer told her during an interview. "You make us feel connected to strangers while acknowledging our essential solitude. It's quite profound." The awards ceremony fell on the Biennale's final evening. Olivia sat with Fiona and Thomas in the ornate theater, trying to maintain composure as categories were announced. When New Vision Artist appeared on screen, she gripped Fiona's hand. "And the award goes to Olivia Reeves for her transformation of urban alienation into moments of transcendent human connection." The applause was deafening as she made her way to the stage, her red gown catching light like one of her own photographs. From the podium, she gazed out at the assembled luminaries of the art world and spotted Daniel in the press section, his expression unreadable as he watched her accept an honor that placed her firmly beyond his reach. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady. "3 years ago, I was reminded rather painfully of my ordinariness. It was perhaps the greatest gift I've ever received, the push to discover that ordinary moments, ordinary people, and ordinary emotions are actually the most extraordinary subjects of all." As applause erupted again, Olivia felt a circle completing. The woman who had been discarded for being too ordinary had found extraordinary success by celebrating exactly that quality in the world around her. The irony wasn't lost on her, nor, she suspected, on Daniel, whose gaze she deliberately avoided as she left the stage, award in hand, headed toward a future entirely of her own making. Full circle. The New York winter wrapped the city in crystalline, cold, transforming Whitcomb Gallery's soaring windows into frames for swirling snow. Inside, warmth and anticipation filled the space as staff made final preparations for the opening of New Masters, the exhibition that would introduce Olivia's work to the American art market. We've already had inquiries from 3 major museums and a dozen serious collectors, Evelyn informed her during the pre-opening walkthrough. The Venice Award created considerable momentum. Olivia nodded, still adjusting to the business side of art. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind, signing with Whitcomb, completing commissioned work for Japanese and European clients, beginning production on her first monograph. Success had arrived with startling speed, bringing opportunities she'd never imagined and challenges she was still learning to navigate. "Your installation looks magnificent," Evelyn continued, gesturing toward the gallery's central space where convergence commanded attention. The triptych had been dramatically scaled up for the exhibition, its emotional power intensified by size. Surrounding it were 20 selected works from Olivia's portfolio, each representing a milestone in her artistic journey. "We've placed your earliest published work here." Evelyn indicated a corner displaying the harbor photographs that had launched Olivia's career. "The contrast with your current style creates a compelling narrative. Viewers can trace your evolution." Olivia studied the harbor images with a strange tenderness. They appeared almost naive now, technically imperfect but raw with authentic emotion. "I was different then," she mused, "broken but awakening." "That vulnerability translates into your work even now," Evelyn observed. "It's what distinguishes you from technically proficient photographers who lack emotional depth. You've experienced transformation yourself, so you recognize it in others." The observation resonated uncomfortably. For all her success, Olivia still struggled with imposter syndrome, moments of disbelief that her work deserved such recognition, that her perspective merited international attention. These doubts usually surfaced during pre-dawn hours when sleep eluded her and memory replayed Daniel's dismissive words. Evening brought the private opening reception, an exclusive event for critics, collectors, and industry insiders that would set the tone for public reception. Olivia chose a sculptural ivory pantsuit that projected confidence while allowing comfortable movement through hours of networking. "You've come a long way from that black dress at Daniel's company gala," Fiona remarked as they prepared in Olivia's hotel suite. "Remember how invisible you felt?" "Hard to forget," Olivia replied, fastening diamond studs, a gift to herself after the Tokyo commission. "Though sometimes I still expect to wake up back in that life with all this just an elaborate dream." Fiona squeezed her shoulder. "This is real, Liv. You built this reality photograph by photograph, choice by choice." The reception exceeded even Whitcomb's expectations. New York's art elite circulated through the gallery, champagne flutes in hand, discussing Olivia's work with the reverence usually reserved for established masters. Critics gestured animatedly before her images, identifying influences and innovations. Collectors cornered Evelyn with acquisition inquiries. Several attendees approached Olivia directly, seeking explanations of her process or sharing emotional responses to specific photographs. "Your Night Train series reminds me of Edward Hopper, but with a distinctly 21st century sensibility," commented an elderly curator from the Metropolitan Museum. "The isolation feels technological rather than existential." "That's precisely what I hope to convey," Olivia replied, surprised by her own confidence in discussing artistic intentions that had once been instinctual rather than deliberate. Midway through the evening, Evelyn appeared at her elbow. "The Times critic just called your work revelatory. We couldn't ask for better. Also, there's someone rather persistent about meeting you. Worldview Media apparently wants an exclusive interview." Olivia's pulse quickened. "Worldview? Is it—" "A woman named Vanessa Harlow," Evelyn supplied, "their new executive editor for arts and culture." The name hit like a physical blow. Vanessa, the woman Daniel had left her for, now wanted to interview her. The irony was almost too perfect. "I should decline," Olivia's first instinct whispered. "You should absolutely accept," countered her professional judgment. Worldview's coverage would reach millions, extending her audience beyond the art world. "Where is she?" Olivia asked. Decision made. Vanessa waited near a photograph titled Threshold, an image of an elderly woman hesitating at the entrance to a bustling Tokyo market, her expression capturing the universal human moment of gathering courage before entering an overwhelming space. Ms. Reeves. Vanessa extended her hand, professional smile firmly in place. Your exhibition is extraordinary. Worldview would be honored to feature your work in our global arts section. She looked essentially the same, perhaps more polished, her makeup more subtle and expensive, but with the same confident energy that had once made Olivia feel dull by comparison. Now, however, Olivia recognized it as a carefully constructed persona rather than intrinsic superiority. Thank you, Olivia replied evenly, accepting the handshake. I understand you're interested. In an interview. A feature, actually. Our Visionaries series profiles artists who are redefining their mediums. Vanessa's gaze was direct but slightly wary, suggesting she recognized Olivia but wasn't entirely certain of being recognized in return. Your rise has been meteoric. Exactly. The kind of story our readers appreciate. They discussed parameters, timing, focus, photography to accompany the article, with professional detachment. Neither acknowledged their connection through Daniel, maintaining the fiction that this was merely a standard media interaction. As they finalized details, Olivia noticed Vanessa's attention repeatedly drawn to the wedding band on her left hand. Recent marriage? Vanessa asked, apparently unable to contain her curiosity. No. Olivia glanced at the ring, a vintage sapphire she'd purchased after her first major sale. A promise to myself, actually. A reminder that I'm complete on my own. Something flickered across Vanessa's expression. Recognition, perhaps even respect. Before she could respond, commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Daniel stood in the doorway, scanning the crowd with obvious purpose. He had aged in the months since Venice, subtle changes that suggested stress rather than time. When his gaze found Vanessa, relief crossed his features, followed immediately by shock as he registered who she was speaking with. Excuse me, Vanessa said quickly. My colleague appears to need assistance. She moved toward Daniel with forced casualness, intercepting him before he could approach. Their whispered conversation was intense, her gestures indicating the exhibition, the crowd, the inappropriateness of whatever he was proposing. Finally, with visible reluctance, he allowed her to guide him toward Olivia. Ms. Reeves. Vanessa's voice was professionally smooth again. My colleague Daniel Reeves handles our business partnerships. He was hoping to discuss possible collaboration between your work and Worldview's corporate clients. The pretense was paper-thin, but Olivia appreciated the attempt at maintaining professional distance. Mr. Reeves, she acknowledged with a polite nod. Daniel seemed unable to match her composure. Olivia, he faltered, glancing around at the gallery bearing her name, the influential figures discussing her work, the transformation of the woman he had dismissed. This is incredible. You're incredible. Thank you, she replied simply, neither encouraging nor rejecting his obvious attempt at reconciliation. I always knew you had potential, he continued, echoing his social media comment from months before. If you'd realized I could be successful, you wouldn't have left? Olivia finished for him, her voice calm but firm. That's not exactly flattering, Daniel. He flushed. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? She gestured toward her photographs. These images celebrate ordinary moments because I learned to see their value. You taught me that lesson, though not in the way you intended. Before he could respond, Evelyn approached with an elderly gentleman whose bow tie and intense gaze marked him as a serious collector. Olivia, Harrison Wells is interested in commissioning a series for his foundation. Daniel, Vanessa, excuse us, please. The interruption was perfectly timed, allowing Olivia to disengage with professional grace. As she walked away with Evelyn, she felt Daniel's gaze following her. The weight of his reassessment, his regret, perhaps even his realization of what he had discarded. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of introductions, discussions, and quiet triumph. By closing, Whitcomb had sold 14 pieces and confirmed 3 major commissions. Critics lingered, making notes for reviews that would appear in morning editions. Olivia's feet ached from hours of standing, but exhilaration overrode physical discomfort. As the last guests departed, she found herself alone in the gallery, surrounded by her work, images that had begun as healing and evolved into art. She moved to the harbor photographs, studying her earliest published images with new perspective. Finding your beginning? Thomas Blackwood's voice echoed in the empty space. Her former mentor had arrived late, missing the formal reception but catching the exhibition itself. Remembering it, Olivia corrected. The woman who took these photos was just starting to believe she might be more than someone's wife. And now? She smiled, genuine and complete. Now she knows she's exactly who she's supposed to be. Later that night, Olivia stood at her hotel window, watching snow transform Manhattan into a dreamscape of light and shadow. Her phone buzzed with a text from Fiona. Saw Daniel leaving with tail between legs. Victory complete? Olivia considered the question. Was it victory she felt? Not exactly. The emotion was subtler, not triumph over Daniel, but transcendence beyond the limitations he had represented. The ordinary woman he had rejected had discovered her extraordinary self not to prove him wrong, but because pain had finally forced her to look inward rather than seeking validation externally. She typed her response. Not victory. Freedom. Setting. Down her phone, Olivia returned to the window. Below, a young woman hurried through the snow, camera raised to capture the storm's beauty. Something in her determined posture, her absorption in the moment, resonated deeply. Without thinking, Olivia reached for her own camera, framing the scene. A solitary figure finding her vision amid swirling change. The shutter clicked, capturing light and shadow, isolation and possibility. Another ordinary moment transformed into something timeless. Another beginning. 6 months later, Olivia stood on a stage at Princeton University, addressing photography students eager to understand her meteoric rise. Behind her, a slideshow displayed milestones in her career, from harbor photos to her latest work documenting climate refugees in Pacific Island nations. Success is seductive, she told them, but it's not the point. The point is authenticity. For years, I tried to be what someone else wanted. Smaller, quieter, less ambitious. When that relationship ended, I didn't immediately become successful. I simply became myself. A student raised her hand. Do you regret the years you spent supporting your ex-husband's career instead of pursuing photography? Olivia considered the question carefully. I don't believe in regrets. Those years taught me to see beyond the obvious, to find beauty in ordinary moments, to recognize the humanity in people others overlook. Without that experience, I might take different photographs, but they wouldn't carry the same emotional truth. As the lecture concluded, students crowded forward with questions and portfolios. Among them was a young woman whose work showed remarkable sensitivity but lacked technical refinement, much like Olivia's early harbor images. You have a unique perspective, Olivia told her. The technical skills will come with practice, but your eye for emotional truth can't be taught. The student beamed. That means everything coming from you. You're the reason I decided to pursue photography instead of the business degree my parents wanted. Driving back to her Manhattan apartment. That evening, Olivia reflected on this unexpected legacy, inspiring others to pursue authentic paths rather than prescribed ones. It was perhaps the most meaningful measure of her transformation. Her phone rang through the car's speaker system. Ms. Reeves, this is Julian Torres from the Pulitzer Committee. We're calling about your climate refugee series. as she listened. To the news that would represent yet another professional milestone, Olivia smiled at the universe's perfect symmetry. The woman once deemed too ordinary to keep had found extraordinary purpose in celebrating precisely that quality in others. Not through dramatic reinvention, but through authentic revelation, uncovering the self that had always existed beneath layers of accommodation and compromise. The ordinary had become extraordinary, not by changing its nature, but by being truly seen, through her lens and finally through her own eyes.